Hi, everyone, and welcome to the FEZZIWIG Report. My name is Jeremy Goldstein. I am a fan of A Christmas Carol in many, many forms, both the novel by Charles Dickens and also many of the adaptations. I want to introduce to you my very dear friend who's joining me on this journey. Please welcome Phil Duvall. Phil is a priest in the Episcopal Church. Phil, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I told you I was going to surprise you with the name of the thing.
The FEZZIWIG Report is perfect.
I thought you would enjoy that. Welcome, first of all. Thank you for joining me for this. I don't quite know what this thing is or what it will be, except in general concept. But the goal is we're going to talk about A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about A Christmas Carol a lot. And I hope people will be pleasantly surprised by how fruitful those discussions can be, because A Christmas Carol is a wide-ranging cultural phenomenon that goes back almost 200 years at this point, and has just been so widely adapted. There's film adaptations. I think everybody in their lives has maybe seen at least one stage adaptation. We're going to talk about film versions. We're going to talk about things that have been that were inspired by A Christmas Carol. By Charles Dickens. We'll talk about the cultural significance of it. But first, I want to say that I'm enjoying a nice holiday beverage.
What is that holiday beverage?
This is an Irish coffee to sort of set the mood. What are you having?
I'm having a holiday ale from West Side Brewery, West Side Brewing Company, which is on the west side of Cincinnati, Ohio.
And that's where you are.
I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, hence the Cincinnati Reds hat. And I wanted to get a local beer. We have a wonderful array of local breweries in Cincinnati, and so this is one of them. I've never had one from West Side before, but it was one of the only ones that didn't look lame. I was like that, so I went for it. So ale with cinnamon, ginger, and sweet orange peel, because nothing says Christmas like oranges.
It's amazing how many Christmassy beers have orange peel or orange.
Lovely, genuinely a lovely ale. So to you,
L'chaim, cheers. Merry Christmas, first of all.
And to you. I also just always have a Diet Coke sitting nearby. So if you see me,
that's good.
Double fist, don't be surprised.
Good. I always have the full bottle of Jameson's sitting nearby. So
that's beautiful.
This coffee doesn't get it done.
The refill, right.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me for this. There's a couple of things we're going to talk about today. There's a couple of things we're going to talk about over the series. This is a limited series because certainly we could not get a discussion of all of the adaptations of A Christmas Carol into one half an hour or 45-minute block. We are probably not going to get to every single adaptation that has ever been made. And I say probably, I'm kidding. We definitely won't. There are tons.
There's like a Barbie. There's like a Barbie one.
Oh yeah, we're not.
I mean, there's so many that we're never going to watch.
If you have a smart TV or a Roku or something like that, and you just speak into it, A Christmas Carol, you will just, it'll boggle the mind. And I'm assuming that the Hallmark channel has not helped that situation. It's probably one for every different.
But neither does Amazon, because Amazon will put things up that are, we looked at one, I was like, ooh, there's a newer one. And then I started watching the preview and I said, oh, this looks terrible. And my daughter goes, this does not look very good.
Well, my list is curated. We'll probably we'll tease some of the other ones that we're going to talk about later on, I'm sure. But my list is curated based on my own research of when I tried to watch as many major adaptations as there were, as were made or publicly released, some that were on TV, some that were on film. So it comes down to about 10 or maybe a dozen if we can squeeze them all in. But we're going to talk about them over the course of this series, and we're going to, as I said, we're going to compare them in terms of how they relate to the book. Are they fair adaptations? Are they good adaptations? We are not ranking them. That is just that's silly. We don't do that. We're adults. We don't need to rank.
We're adults. We don't need to make top 10 lists. That's come on.
That's right. Good. Anyway, we're going to talk about all those versions of A Christmas Carol that come up. We're going to have some fun and games. We're going to play with the story a little bit. We're going to play a game that probably next time that I haven't even told you about that I'm very excited to surprise you with when we get to it. But it's really important to say we're not ranking versions, and we understand if you're disappointed if we don't get to your favorite version. I think it's a very personal thing. There's some probably that people watch every year. That's like that's the Christmas Carol. That's
all one, right?
That's the one. There is no finer, there is no better. Let me tell you, I've probably seen it, and if it didn't make the cut, then I disagree. And maybe we'll talk about why I disagree, but who knows? Maybe you can convince me, or someone else can convince me. Bill, do you want to tell us just a little bit about your experience? Because I've said, I've watched so many versions, and one year I actually did like little capsule reviews of them.
Yeah, I remember reading those. I remember a few years back when you did that, and I thought, man, this guy's nuts. I've never seen all those, and so here's what's funny is you brought me into this, and you were kind of under the assumption, because I think because when you did it before, you were like I was very effusive in my praise of it. I thought it was really cool. You were like, oh, you must really love A Christmas Carol. And then I realized I'd never seen one. I've seen the play when I was a kid once. I've seen the Mickey's Christmas Carol a ton of times, Muppet Christmas Carol like half a time, and I've seen Scrooged a bunch of times. And of course just knew the story, but I hadn't really seen A Christmas Carol movies, and had not read the book. And so you were like, well, let's do this. So in the last 3 weeks or 2, I've read the book, which isn't a big task because it's not very long, but I read the book. And I've seen like 9 adaptations of Christmas Carol, only maybe 1 of which I'd seen, or 2 of which I'd seen before. So like, this is a new thing for me, and I'm madly in love. And you said, we're going to watch a lot of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a lot about A Christmas Carol. And I wanted to say, we're also going to talk about a lot of Christmas carols, because we're going to talk about so many different ones. But I'm so overjoyed that you asked me to do this, because I feel like I have a new Christmas tradition. I don't know what it'll be yet. I don't think it's watching all of them every Christmas.
Maybe that's what we'll have to do, is at the end of all of this, we'll ask you,
what are the 3 Christmas tradition?
Yeah, what are the 3 that are going to make your
And I'm getting there with that, actually.
It's funny because people do. I love Christmas. I'm a Jew, by the way. I should just make sure people.
I didn't want to bring it up. I thought
that's part of what delights me about this, is that I am a Jew, as evidence.
You get the menorah and the
menorah. I want to throw some props to Hanukkah, but I also love Christmas, so I've got my Santa hat in the background. And that's something that comes up when talking about the history of A Christmas Carol that I didn't know until I started researching some of the history, which is that some critics at the time and years later slam it, but they criticize it for being a secular look at Christmas, even though there's plenty of religious imagery.
Yeah.
But it definitely evokes a time in England. This was also new to me, when they were bringing back Christmas traditions that they had not celebrated like en masse for a very long time. No pun intended. But like the country, I guess, had not been celebrating Christmas in that way. Maybe there was some leftover Oliver Cromwell BS going on. That'd be my guess, but I'm not a historian. I'm an armchair historian. But in any case, I am a Jew, but I do love Christmas stuff. I love Christmas movies. I love Christmas specials. And when it comes to my pantheon of like favorite Christmas movies, like I have a top 5, like everybody else I'm sure does. None of the versions of A Christmas Carol are in it, because I consider it like a separate category. You've got TV Christmas specials, like the Charlie Brown Christmas, which is the greatest of all. That's the GOAT for me. The Garfield Christmas I watch every year. Simpsons Christmas special, not the original episode. Those are TV specials. Then you've got Christmas movies, which for some reason, like none of the Christmas carols make my top 5, except one you mentioned, which we're going to talk later on in the series about Scrooged and whether or not it is actually an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. But I love where you were. We're going to jump into our first film for the day. But what you mentioned was really important. The 3 that you were most familiar with before going into this were Mickey's Christmas Carol, Muppet Christmas Carol, and Scrooged, which are 3 really interesting ways to get into the story, because you get the whole thing.
That's right.
Today we're going to talk about Mickey's Christmas Carol. We're going to talk about Muppet Christmas Carol. And then, just because we're on a theme of like animation or made for kids, even though they're good for adults, we're going to talk about the 2009 Jim Carrey motion capture Robert Zemeckis Christmas Carol, which you gave us the title of before.
It's Disney, A Christmas Carol. It is technically a Disney production.
They're actually all 3 Disney. So if you don't
Now
have,
they are all owned, but you can get all of them on Disney Plus, right? That's how I watched all 3 of them.
that's good to know. That's a good tip for everybody. It's not a plug for Disney,
No.
but it's also why we're not going to use clips from any of these, because I don't want this to get pulled off the internet. Also, I don't even know that I would be able to put clips onto the show.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we're going to talk first about Mickey's Christmas Carol, which is actually, I think, for a lot of people, their first in.
The entree.
Because it's Disney, so it's kid friendly, it's family friendly, but for people of our age, people who were born in the late 70s.
You know when it came out? I feel like it's our generation. Like it came out while we were alive.
Yeah, it was 83, 82, 83.
Oh my gosh. So it grew up with us, and it's only 30 minutes long, 35 minutes long.
Right, exactly. And it's amazing that watching it again, I watch it every year, but like, it's amazing. There's a few things about it that are just kind of impressive, even though I don't love it. And I'll say that. I don't think there's a version today that I love that we're talking about.
Interesting. Go ahead.
Well, we'll get to it. I'll explain when I get to it. But with A Mickey's Christmas Carol, it's a good intro for kids. For kids who are maybe still a little too young to read the book. It's a good intro to the story. You get the classic, you get the classic bits of the story. You get all 3 ghosts. You get the idea that Scrooge is a bad guy. One of the most interesting things that I found out, and I think this is a testament to how much A Christmas Carol is in the cultural pantheon, like beyond Christmas. Scrooge McDuck was not created for Mickey's Christmas Carol.
No way.
That's true.
I just assumed.
No, Scrooge McDuck came into the picture like in the 40s, maybe in Donald Duck comics, I think.
Wow.
Someone can fact check me on that. But Scrooge McDuck is a character that was not designed for Mickey's Christmas Carol. It's just someone who was writing Scrooge, someone who was writing Donald Duck at that point was like, we need a miser uncle. Let's call him Scrooge.
I love that. I had no idea. It works so well.
Well, it's funny because one thing I wanted to mention about Mickey's Christmas Carol that works really well, and it works well in the Muppets too, is the casting. When you're doing something like that, you have to cast it from your own characters. And I thought they invented Scrooge. They didn't. So that was a no-brainer. Who's going to play Scrooge? Maybe.
Who do we do this? But then it couldn't be Mickey, although it never would have been, because Mickey was never going to be angry. So Mickey fits the Bob Cratchit mold really well.
Yes. Bob Cratchit winds up being like the hero in these versions for kids and American versions. And that's a really interesting point. And so you're always going to take your hero from your cast. So that's Mickey. And of course, in the Muppets, that'd be Kermit. So it makes sense. And the story is kind of
personality-wise, we'll get to Kermit, but yeah.
The other thing that is really impressive about this, not only is how much they cram in to like 25, it's about actually 25, 26 minutes long, but the whole, like a full 33% is the first scene of the story, which in a lot of versions is a longer scene. It's the counting house scene. We meet Bob Cratchit, we meet Fred, we meet the 2 guys working for charity. And so, it's amazing how you get 8 or 9 minutes into the movie, you haven't seen a ghost yet.
That's right.
And then you only have 15 minutes left, and they somehow managed to get a lot done.
They really, I actually was kind of marveling at how they, having read the book and having watched a couple adaptations, going back and watching Mickey, I was amazed by how much they fit into, they really get the point across very quickly. The basic, like if you wanted to give someone the Cliff's Notes, it's like a Cliff's Notes version of A Christmas Carol.
Scrooge is so well defined, and maybe part of that is because by 1983 he was pretty well defined as like apparently the money pit that he swims in.
It was interesting dynamic to think about him and like Goofy as Jacob Marley, like because as you said, they take these existing personalities and try to fit in them. Marley tends to be has the capacity to be one of the scariest parts of the story, and. Okay. No. Yep. Bye. This is gonna happen.
We're gonna have a special guest star a little bit later on.
I know.
We got like a cameo tease like right off the bat.
I think she thought that if she was fast, somehow no one would notice. I'm not kidding. Like I will go quickly. No, don't. And so, anyways,
it was good. That was well tacked.
I was interested, like that what they because they had to figure out a way to put Goofy in, obviously. but like,
Yeah, it does feel like they were a little stuck on that. They were
Yeah.
sort of like, we don't know where to put Goofy.
And I was really, when I look back on it, I was really disappointed in the Christmas Present, the Ghost of Christmas Present, because they chose the giant.
Yeah, and he's kind of stupid. He's like the
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Is that the giant from like Jack and the Beanstalk or something?
And
Like,
I tend to think that I'm when I think about it, I'm starting to think that that in a lot of ways the Ghost of Christmas Present is one of the make or break characters for me in an adaptation. If the Ghost of Christmas Present isn't good, I don't like the story as much. And I think, and I have a couple examples of that, but this one is one where it was, again, they picked like it's literally like they're like, who's their physically biggest guy?
right. Well, that's one of the defining characteristics of that ghost, is that he's bigger than life. He's big, like the room, you know, when Scrooge enters the room, it kind of changes.
I almost think Goofy, who's not stupid, he's just goofy, but he's not stupid. Goofy actually would have been a better Ghost of Christmas Present, because there's a jovial nature to the character that then delivers this really serious like message.
Maybe it was one of the ways, because it veers into the scary territory towards the very end.
They picked the right Ghost of Christmas future for being scary.
Yeah, I mean the animation, especially though, like when Scrooge is like looking down into the grave, and it's like that ghost, like he's got the cigar. I don't, who's that character? I forget. He seems Goofy related, but like he's got that cigar, and he's like, "Here's your grave," and then the
bad guy whose name I forget.
Maybe the reason to have Goofy as Marley was just to give it like a little bit of that comedy. I think it is silly. Like there's goofiness, there's silliness in that. I mean, he trips on the thing a couple of times. Like the ghost is a little silly in that one, and then you get the Ghost of Christmas. By the way, Ghost of Christmas Past is Jiminy Cricket, which is like, that's the greatest casting of all time.
It's actually like a brilliant, especially because in the book, the Ghost of Christmas Past is not really a human figure.
Right.
Like, it's really the most ill-defined, not the right term. It's the most ambiguously defined character.
That's why it's interesting to me that you say the Ghost of Christmas Present is so important to get right, because I feel like everybody kind of does the same thing. Because, and actually, I want to show this. You know, the original book came with illustrations by an illustrator named John Leach. And let me show you the actual illustration from the book. There you go.
That's right.
We'll talk about the symbolism of that, I'm sure, a lot. But like, that is a pretty well-defined thing.
Yes.
And you're right. Ghost of Christmas Past in every version is like so wildly different, because it's such a strange depiction in the book. You know, it's a ghost, pure light, and it's got this light coming from its head. Some of that makes it into very different versions. It's always a well-lit person. Sometimes it's a little androgynous. Sometimes it's played by a man, sometimes by a woman, in like various depictions. But like the second two ghosts are pretty well defined. Like in culture.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
But here's what I'll say. Like, you know, when you go to a new diner, you've never been there before, and you don't, I'm gonna get a cheeseburger and fries. If it's a restaurant, not a diner, I might get if it's lunchtime, I might get a chicken Caesar. Okay, those are my two go-to meals. They're very well-defined meals. Like, you can do a bunch of things to a burger. You love burgers. You can do a bunch of things to a burger. But at a diner, when you order a cheeseburger from a diner and French fries, that's a well-defined. That's a pretty well-defined diner meal. How that within the definition of that, within the diner definition of that, how that diner handles the cheeseburger tells you what you need to know. So that's why I think, and Caesar salad similar, is at a restaurant, not a diner so much, but at a restaurant.
Call that the cheeseburger theory. It's better than the Caesar salad.
And I live by it, like, it's very real to me. So the Christmas Present, like, because Christmas Past is a character that's so like funky, I think you can do a bunch of cool stuff. And so Jiminy Cricket's like a very cool, actually all of the variations in that we're going to talk about today, I think are really cool. But Christmas Present needs to be done like how they work within the strictures of the well-defined character for me. Like, we won't talk about it at all today, but just to say, like the Albert Finney version, the musical version of Scrooge with that Christmas Present, I hated him so much that I like it. I mean, it colors how I think about the rest of the movie. So it ends up being a really important character for me.
We'll look forward to hearing more about that. But the Ghost of Christmas Present is one that has so many important things to say, whereas the Ghost of Christmas Past has so many important things to show that set up the rest of the story a little bit. But the Ghost of Christmas Present in the book has some of the best lines, has some of the best moments, and it's some of the most impactful stuff about like the here and now. And here's a testament to these adaptations and the book. I had said very specifically, I wanted to keep all of our little discussions about all of these versions very short. Yeah, so we got double time. So I want to move it along, but I want to leave one parting thought about the Mickey's Christmas Carol, because it is a good intro. And here's how powerful and how kind of how much it's burned into some of our brains, depending on when you watched it and how old you are. When I think of Fezziwig, I think of Mr. Toad, playing the fiddle, sitting on the high desk or the high chair during the Fezziwig ball scene. And yet, I watched it again yesterday. That Fezziwig has 0 lines. He doesn't say anything. You only see him playing the fiddle. And that's just how much that some of the images from A Mickey's Christmas Carol just kind of burned into our mind. So moving on, this is our signal for moving on. We're moving on to part number 2. Now we're going to talk about A Muppet Christmas Carol, which that was made in 1992, and I don't know if it's on Disney because they bought the Muppets after 92, or if they made it before. Okay, but the Muppet Christmas Carol, this is one where when you ask people about A Christmas Carol, a lot of people go right to a Muppet. Oh, the Muppet Christmas Carol, that's the one. I've heard a lot of friends, a lot of geek friends, a lot of people who love, pop culture stuff. That's the one they watch every year. I bristle at that. I'll be honest with you. I bristle at it a little. It's good. I didn't watch it when I was a kid. I would have been 13 when it came out. I think I saw parts of it. For some reason, they showed it at school at some point. I don't know. I watched some of it in like a classroom. I remember that. But we didn't watch the whole thing. But I didn't watch the whole thing until a few years ago. It's interesting. I think it came at a time when the Muppets were not making original Muppet content very much. They weren't. Right. It was years after.
And
yeah, it was years after Muppets Take Manhattan. There hadn't been like an original Muppet story. So like you mentioned Muppet Treasure Island. I don't know the order they came out, but it was a post Jim Henson had died. The movie at the beginning is dedicated to him. And to Richard Hunt, who I don't remember who that is.
My daughter asked the question. She's like, "Who's that?" I was like, "I don't know."
Sorry, my apologies to the family of Richard Hunt. But in any case, there's a couple of things that go really right for it. Okay,
yes.
It's the Muppets. I'm never not happy to watch the Muppets, and some of the casting is really clever. It's funny that you've got the two Waldorf and Statler as two Marleys.
I'm not sure how I feel about that, but the music is really lovely. It's really well done.
It is. It's not super memorable. I don't walk around the rest of the year humming any of the songs from the Muppet Christmas Carol, but it's good music when I hear it. Yeah, it's good music when I hear it. There's a few good gags. Right. But now I'm just going to start tearing it apart, if you don't mind.
I'll tear it apart and then I'll put it back together when you're done.
You can feel free, but I'll tell you right now. I mean, my biggest problem with it is the Scrooge. Like, I do not like Michael Caine in it.
Wow. In general or in this?
That's interesting. I think I like Michael Caine fine.
Okay.
He's not in my pantheon of like great actors. Now, seeing him as Scrooge, you're like, oh, it makes perfect sense. Like there's a kind of actor who you're always going to expect has a Scrooge under their belt. It's a weird way to put that, a Scrooge under their belt.
Hidden Scrooge.
Yeah, no, there's got to be a ton of actors of that era. Like at some point you were in even a regional theater production, and then you never got to be in a movie. But like, there's some actors that you just assume have played Scrooge before. Usually English or Irish actors, probably grew up playing it, in high school to college, and then small theaters. Certainly some of the ones who made it on screen, Patrick Stewart has probably played it 175 times. Yeah. But Michael Caine is a natural choice. You're like, oh, I'm surprised there wasn't already a Michael Caine Scrooge. It makes sense. He's so low key through the whole thing, and it bothers me. The end, there is a lack of satisfaction when you think of like the joy of that character waking up and I have a second chance at life. The best actors don't go like nuts unrealistically, but the best ones keep a tight lid through the whole thing, and then boom, and it's like the Alleluia chorus, and like they're joyful, and there's just a physical change. You know, some of them, they dance, they jump around, they do all kinds of wonderful stuff. There's a little Arlo Guthrie, all kinds of wonderful stuff. But Michael Caine, it's like, he's just like, oh, okay, Merry Christmas, everybody. And it's extremely disappointing.
That's interesting. So I going back and forth between the really, I saw, you know, I remember I watched a bunch of them really quickly. I ended up really gravitating towards all of the more naturalistic portrayals of Scrooge.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, there were aspects of Cain's that I really liked. Like, but with you saying what you just said, that's true. In the sense of like, do you feel like a life has been saved? Or do you just feel like an old man was kind of grumpy?
This is why you're here, because the stakes just got so elevated.
Well, that's right.
Like,
but it does
been saved?
Well, that's how it's treated. Like that's the story. The story is that
the ghost of Christmas Past says, for your welfare, and he says, well, my welfare requires me to get like a good night's sleep. Right, the ghost says, well, your reclamation.
But here's what I'm thinking.
The term is your reclamation, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a transformation and a reclamation.
What's interesting to me, because of what you just described, is because like, is there something about the fact that they're Muppets, and that like the Muppets Take Manhattan, there are stakes, because Kermit might lose Piggy, and Kermit, like, everything's falling apart. You're surprised I'm going here. But
this is about a Christmas. Keep it Christmas.
No,
keep that content tight.
I'm getting there. But when a Muppet movie where the star isn't a Muppet, the star is a human.
Yeah,
stakes are different. Like, it somehow undermines, like, in a world where Gonzo and Rizzo are talking to each other throughout the movie, and they do a lovely job, and it's quite entertaining. Like, but in a world where that's happening, is anyone really gonna go to hell when they die? Like, is that like that? You know, like you think about, there's even a part in the movie where when it gets to basically like the scary part, where they're like, where Gonzo and Rizzo just go like, so we're gonna check out for a while because this is too scary. We'll be back later. And so then they show back up, and it's like, haha, everything's fine.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I would say it's not helped by the fact that then he wakes up and it's just kind of like a nice day outside. He's not even, I don't even think he dances with the Muppets. And the Muppets themselves that are in, like, they march through the street. I can't think of anything less climactic. Like, you've got the Muppets, like, have them come in. I think they honestly, there's probably more kinetic energy in the opening scene when you're flying in. And you see like the Muppet lettuce, like there's a funny, like the vegetables on the cart, and the Muppet lettuce are like, they're crying, they're screaming, kidnapped or something like that. Like, and there's people like popping out of windows. That's what the ending should be like, you know, this joyful kind of celebration. And instead it just feels like it's Scrooge like marching through the streets like this. And because it's Michael Caine and he's not great at that, it's
so I want to go back. I want to watch it. I'll watch it again next Christmas. I won't watch it again this Christmas, but I really like Michael Caine, and I really did like so much of his performance. So that's why I'm having a hard time with this. But what I'm having a new theory, which is when humans are the co-stars and the Muppet is the star, the stakes are different than when the human is the star and the Muppets are co-stars.
I think you'll have to save that for our Muppet themed series, which we'll do at the point, I guess. But with that said, I like that take very much. I want to move on to one that surprised me. So you're going to tell us a little bit about the Jim Carrey version.
Disney's A Christmas Carol, starring Jim Carrey, and created by or directed by Robert Zemeckis. Robert Zemeckis had just done Polar Express. It was a big hit, and he was really into that motion capture animation, and he wanted to do another one. So he convinced Disney, on the strength of Polar Express's box office, he convinced Disney to let him take a crack at Christmas Carol. And what I'll say about this one is actually, and then I felt this way, then I read some stuff, and my reading supported my theory, which is this is maybe the most faithful adaptation to the book that there is. In terms of straight up details, in terms of lines, in terms of working really hard to get Victorian accents and different things like that. And like the language isn't Americanized at all. And so in a lot of ways, it's the most, it's faithful. It's the most faithful adaptation. I almost want to call it I'm going to maybe pronounce this wrong, but like, it's almost like slavishly faithful. Like, it's like, I will hit every point and we will make this as accurate as possible.
It's interesting that you say that, because, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that watching it again in preparation for our discussion about it, that's the part that really hit me.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the last time I saw it. I might watch it every other year.
I remember when we were talking about this project and I was like, oh man, I'm going to watch a bunch of these with my kids. I'm going to read the book and with the kids. And you were like, well, I want to warn you, this was really originally a ghost story before anything else.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the title. The title and the title he gave it was it says
right.
a ghost story in the subtitle of the thing.
Well, this movie tries to really play up the ghoulishness and the ghost aspect of the story, and there were parts intense for some of my kids, which is fine, good for them. But
there are some flourishes in it that are just really scary.
Yes, and also I don't like them mostly.
Yeah.
I mostly don't like the flourishes. So here's where I don't like the movie. I don't like the flourishes. I actually
just kind of wish I had like a rundown on the side, like flourishes.
Right.
No flourishes.
No. I'm okay. There's a bunch of okay. I'm really impressed with Jim Carrey's voice work in this. Motion capture. One of the things that motion capture, he tries to make these characters look more realistic. Except then Scrooge just looks like a caricature. And the other characters don't. The other characters look more humanistic.
Yeah.
And Scrooge's chin and nose just keep getting bigger and bigger and longer every scene.
So you've said so much that I'm like I really want to unpack. I really want to unpack.
There's so much to unpack.
So I'll start with this is a version that the first time I saw it, I thought visually it's really cool.
Yeah. I
don't like this version. And so I put it on the back shelf. Is there a back shelf? I put it on the back burner. I put it on the high away. I stuffed it away in a bucket of coal. Just put it in the corner. And in preparation for this, I watched it again. And maybe I watched a better version of it, but I was like even more stunned by the visuals, just like how beautiful it looks. It really does look beautiful. Actually, I've got I don't want to say, but there's an Easter egg here that you probably can't even see, but I don't want to say anything in case like those mouse lawyers come after me. But we have the exact opposite take on some of these things, except for a couple. First, I think Jim Carrey, like I think the world of him. I hate his accent. It's distracting in this. Like I thought his accent in way too many points. I'm just like distracted by how it just doesn't sound right compared with everybody else. Having said that, like I think emotionally he's fine, and like definitely at the end, the attention to detail to the story impressed me this time, because I don't think I had ever read the book and then watched an adaptation as closely together. This adaptation anyway. So The Ghost of Christmas Past is like, oh, if you were going to take that from the book and try to do, he's kind of he's this androgynous candle, which is really interesting. I don't think the book calls the ghost like a candle, but that's an interesting way to do it, because it's got this head of light, which makes perfect sense. In a candle context, it kind of flickers in and out, like the past is sort of like flickering, which is really interesting. It's got that cone so he can knock the thing down. I love how much it flies over its world. And then I hate there's a break. There's like a 10-minute break, during The Ghost of Christmas Future, where it becomes this chase through London. And
I literally fast forwarded last night.
It's a drag, and it's not such a short movie without it that they must have felt the need. I don't know why they put it in there. But
I think it's a Zemeckis flourish. I think when you got a guy who makes as much money as he makes and he says, I want to do a thing that'll be fun. That's my guess.
Well, because doing an animated version of A Christmas Carol, it's not like an action-packed story.
Yeah.
So it's not an action-packed story. So you have to be creative with like having them fly to the past and fly over the thing. But then The Ghost of Christmas Future, if you think about it, it's just Scrooge visiting the morgue kind of, Scrooge visiting the bank or the poor people who are talking about how happy they are that he died. So Zemeckis must have felt like I needed an action scene.
And they skipped some stuff in that. For all the faithfulness of it, they skipped some stuff in that. Some lines. Well, there's lines like the bankers, where the guy goes like, where they're like, I'll go if there's lunch. And then the other guy goes like, well, I don't care about getting dressed up or lunch. So I like, there's little things like that.
Well, the guy says, I know he says he'll go if there's a lunch piece.
There's one thing I want to say about this adaptation that is unique, that I find fascinating. And we won't go too deeply into it because we're on a time, but like, they make the creative decision that all of the ghosts are also played by Jim Carrey, and resembling him, which creates a psychological dimension. So the possibility that this is all a dream is sort of pumped up by that. That's okay. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah,
it's still what it is. But the way that they choose to make that decision, I love Jim Carrey's Ghost of Christmas Present. I genuinely love it. His Ghost of Christmas Past is it's a little bit whispery and weird, but that's fine. But the Ghost of Christmas Present, it's one of my favorites. And they also double up casting on Gary Oldman as Marley and Cratchit.
Mm-hmm.
And they double up the Robin Wright is both his little sister and his long lost love. And so
the
idea of doubling up is either lazy or gimmicky. It's definitely gimmicky.
Well, it might also be budget, but
we know it's not budget because he spent he broke the bank.
But it's an effective kind of interesting thing when you put it the ways you did. You know, the fact that what did you say, Gary Oldman is Bob Cratchit and Jake Marley is interesting. Yeah.
And the movie starts with Marley. Movie starts with Marley's dead face and ends with Cratchit's narration.
That was an interesting thing that I thought that I got chills this time watching it, when it's Cratchit looking in the window and then he starts narrating towards the end. And then I also didn't like it, but I thought it was effective, but I also didn't like it.
Oldman's Cratchit is really lovely.
The voice may be good. The character design bugged me for some reason for the first half. Like, he's too little. And I guess that there's like a diminutive, like, okay, he's the little guy, Bob Cratchit, but like he was a little too much like a homunculus. Oh, that's the timer. Sorry. We'll fix that in post. Can we fix that? In post? He's like, the character design is like a little too much like a homunculus, like a little ape-like kind of thing, but he grew on me. I want to close with a couple of things, if you'll indulge me on this one, because you make just like a ton of great points, and I hope people who watch it will keep an open mind and just sort of maybe read the book because of how close some of the things are. Yeah. This is a good one to really read the book and then see how it goes. There is one very cool thing that's, I think, somehow related to what you're talking about with the double up of casting and the Bob Cratchit, like the importance of him. There's a cool scene in the Ghost of Christmas Future bit when Bob Cratchit is walking upstairs and Scrooge is like standing on the stairs, and they meet face to face, the ghost that can't be seen, the ghost of Scrooge and Cratchit, and like they look like it's a chance for Scrooge to actually look into Bob Cratchit's eyes, which is such a creative, smart thing that he really sees. I was rereading before we started. I reread the Fezziwig section, and Scrooge has a line that I don't think ever makes it into any adaptation, which is really funny. But during the Fezziwig scene, most people include the bit where the ghost says, "Oh, who cares about this Fezziwig? It was just like he threw a little bit of money at people, and then Scrooge says, "We don't understand. It was like he could have made our lives hard." But the part that never makes it in is Scrooge in the book says, he's about to say something, and the ghost says, "What were you going to say?" And Scrooge says, No. I was thinking about my own clerk right now. And that is really powerful. I can't believe it doesn't make it in any version. This version, just having him actually look into Bob Cratchit's eyes and see a human being is so important. And I thought they
I love that.
Now we're gonna close on one thing, because I don't want you mentioned it, and we're gonna talk about it way more. What were you gonna say?
One last final tiny thing, because this is the Fezziwig report and we haven't talked about Fezziwig.
That's a fair point.
Bob Hoskins as Fezziwig
Oh yeah.
is so wonderful. And he's a guy who you forget how special he is to us and our generation until he died. And then but when you think about
Bob Hoskins? No, like Frame Roger Rabbit and
Roger Rabbit, Super Mario Brothers, which was terrible, but he was in it. It was terrible, but he was Mario. And then of course Hook, he was Smee. And so he had these places that are big. And so to have him as Fezziwig, and he's gone now, and it's the Ghost of Christmas Past, and Hoskins is dead, and Fezziwig, it was beautiful. It was really beautiful.
This is the actual drawing.
Oh.
This is the classic Fezziwig, and that's Mrs. Fezziwig, but this is the ball, this is the party. There's the fiddler in the Mickey version that is Fezziwig. It's Mr. Toad. But that's the actual drawing. You make a great point. We will talk plenty about Fezziwig and the ball, because it is representative of what I was talking about earlier, where those kinds of Christmas parties had not been happening for very long. Those were newer Christmas traditions, probably less than 100 years, I would guess. Maybe we should get a historian on to actually talk about that. But speaking of history, speaking of the book, you said something very important. I don't want to gloss over it, and I don't want to let it slide by.
What is it?
And this is going to be a tease for future discussions.
Ooh.
And this is where people will start to wonder why the hell I even wanted to do this.
Here it comes.
There is no greater physical adaptation of Scrooge than the Robert Zemeckis version. It is very much pulled from the text of describing Scrooge, including the pointed nose, because it is my argument that this is the finest work of English literature that is also extremely anti-Semitic.
Wow.
And the picture of Jim Carrey as Scrooge couldn't be more telling than that. He is a literal pointed hook nose.
Anti-Semitic propaganda to a T, that picture.
It is very much in some ways pulled out of medieval drawings.
Yeah.
Of that. So we will talk more about that, especially when we get into more, I guess, adult. I don't want to call them adult, but for lack of a better term, today we've talked about kid-friendly, family-friendly versions. We're going to talk more about other versions going on. But thank you for that little wrap up of the Jim Carrey version, which has so many things going for it, but also has a couple of these little nuggets that just make you why? You could have just fixed a couple of those things, and it might have been better. Phil, I want to thank you very much. Before we close this edition, I'll just tease that we're gonna talk about a couple of different. Well, now they're all live action, pretty much. I think we're gonna talk about a bunch of different versions next time. We're gonna talk a little bit more about how they capture the book. They're a lot of them, as live action and as longer films. There's more they can do. So we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna play a fun game, which I teased before, that you don't know anything about, but I'm gonna email you about it, and we're gonna play a fun game that I think people will enjoy. And I also want to point out that Charles Dickens, one of the reasons he wrote A Christmas Carol was because he wanted to instill in people a sense of charitable giving. And he looked around the London that he lived in, and he thought, boy, people are poor and people need things, and especially at the Christmas time of year. So part of his mission was to raise awareness about that. So I would like to implore anybody who's watching this to make a contribution to the charitable organization of your choice around this time of year, especially this year, in a year that's been as challenging as it has. Certainly a lot of nonprofit organizations that do a lot of good in the world have been having more trouble fundraising. So this is the time of year for giving. If you're looking for ideas and suggestions, today I'd like to make a plug for LA Family Housing, which operates a shelter in North Hollywood, as well as other services that they provide. Their URL is lafh.org. At this time of year, you can make any kind of charitable contribution. Any amount really helps. They're also seeking gift cards, and I think because of online giving right now, and because of limited access to stores and things like that, they'll accept a $20 or a $25 donation. They will turn that into a gift card that one of their residents or one of their clients can use at a grocery store or department store to help make this season a little bit brighter. Phil, anything else you want to say before we close out?
I love it. I'm so excited to keep going.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for the first edition of the Fezziwig Report. I want to thank Phil, and for the rest of you, we'll see you soon. And may you be happy in the life that you've chosen.